So after many requests, we're going to be talking about what are the 5 best long-range rifles currently inside Warzone after the Season 4 Reloaded update. Now we're going to go over the 5 best TTK rifles, and we're also going to go over what are the overall 5 best long-range rifles. If you enjoy weapon stat breakdowns and overall weapon comparisons, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we're trying to reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers, and click that link in the description down below and subscribe to our second channel. We do post extra content over there. So a few things I do want to get out the way first. We're going to first go over what are the 5 best rifles for TTK at those long distances, and then we're going to go over what are the 5 best long range rifles, because they're not necessarily the same thing, because some rifles could have a good TTK but no recoil to actually back it up. On top of that, we only focused on assault rifles and fully automatic assault rifles to be more specific, and that's because they're easier to control. Semi-automatic rifles are not really that valuable. Then the burst tac rifles are not that great inside Warzone, especially now that the headshot multiplier has been reduced. And then lastly, LMGs are just way too slow. So like I said, we mainly focused on ARs because that's what most people will be using. Now with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the 5 TTK rifles at long range. So we mainly focused at their second damage drop off and seeing what kind of time to kill you would get at that distance. So at number 1, we actually have the FFAR, and this has a 600 millisecond TTK at long range. Like I said, this gun isn't really viable though at long distance, because if you've used this weapon and you've tried to use it at long range, even having the best build, the recoil control is just very hard to use. So like I said, the FFAR is not really viable. And next we have the FARA 83. So the FARA has a TTK of 684 milliseconds, which is extremely viable in Warzone, and it's probably one of the fastest TTKs in the game right now. Then we have the Cold War AK, and the Cold War AK has a TTK of 700 milliseconds, pretty much bang on. Then we have the Ram 7, which people were worried about the Ram 7 nerf, but the nerf was only to its close range damage, not to its long range damage. So it's still a very viable long range weapon, which is 701 milliseconds, so not far off the Cold War AK. And then lastly, we have the GRAU. Now the GRAU is mainly like a sniper support kind of gun, but that's not what this video is about. But the TTK on that at long range is 716 milliseconds. So like I said, some of these guns are not really viable for like super long range engagements. So let's kick off this top 5 list, and I do need to give an honorable mention to the AN94. The AN94 actually has a faster time to kill than the M4A1 by 3 milliseconds, but in my honest opinion, I feel like more people would prefer still to use the M4A1 just because it doesn't have that hyperburst feature and it's just much easier to use overall. So the time to kill for the M4A1 is actually 741 milliseconds, which is still pretty good considering all the other weapons that are in the game now, and most of the TTKs are around about 800 milliseconds. So with this weapon here, when it comes to the best class setup, you do want to use the mono suppressor for the sound suppression and the damage range. For the barrel, you've got 2 options. You can use the Grenadier barrel, or you can use the Corvus Marksman barrel. It just depends. If you want a slightly faster ADS, you can go for the Marksman. Personally, I would always choose to go for the Grenadier barrel regardless of the way you want to build this weapon. Just having the best recoil control is going to help the most, and to be fair, you want to extend the range as much as you can. But like I said, the Grenadier barrel is the best option. Now, you do want to use the Commando foregrip. This is the best grip for the M4A1. If anyone tells you Merc foregrip or otherwise, they're lying to you pretty much. Ammunition, biggest mags possible, which is the 60 round mags. You do want to go for those. And then you've got 2 good options with the M4. So if you want to use this as like a mid-range gun and you don't find yourself fighting at those super long distances, like past 150 meters roughly, then you can go for the TAC laser, because the iron sights on the M4, especially the base iron sights, are super clean. It's one of the cleanest iron sights in the game. So you could go for the TAC laser for a faster ADS and aiming stability. But if you do want to get like the maximum range out of this as possible, then you definitely go for that VLK optic. And building it either which way is definitely great, but the M4A1 is an amazing option right now. At number 4, we have the KRIG, and the KRIG is actually one of the best guns and has been one of the best guns at long range for a while now. Now, the new TTK for the KRIG is actually 736 milliseconds, and they actually buffed the damage on this weapon, especially at long range. So this gun is even more viable than it was before, and they never really changed the recoil on this weapon either. Now I do have to give an honorable mention once again to the SCAR H. The SCAR H actually has a 732 millisecond TTK, which is 4 milliseconds quicker than the KRIG. But as you can imagine, at those longer distances, the KRIG is going to be way more consistent But like I said, for the best class setup on the KRIG, you do want to use the agency suppressor for the sound suppression, vertical recoil control, bullet velocity, and damage range. This is the best attachment when it comes to suppressors, especially on long range weapons anyway. The barrel, you do want to choose the last barrel, which is the mil spec. This is going to give you the best bullet velocity as well as control the recoil as best as possible. Then you do also want to go for the field agent grip, again to control that recoil. This gun doesn't really have much recoil, so you could actually do away with the field agent on the KRIG, but I would still use it regardless to help as much as possible. Then you want to go for the STANAG 60 round mags. It's the largest mags possible. That's pretty much it. There's not really any other option there. Then lastly, you want to go for the axial 3 times or the Royal and Cross 4 times, depending on which you prefer. The KRIG is the best low recoil rifle in the game at the moment. The GRAU and the M13 are very close because they also got a damage buff, but the TTKs are still not as good as the KRIG. At number 3, we have the Ram 7. Like I said, this gun is still very viable at long range. With the new update, all they adjusted was the close range damage, and that's just to make it not as good at sniper support, or basically not better than any of the SMGs in the game, but it still performs at a 701 millisecond TTK at long range, which is still extremely viable. So like I said, it's still a really good gun to use, especially if you know how to use it, and most people have been using this gun for a while now. So for the muzzle, you do want to use the mono suppressor for the sound suppression and the damage range. For the barrel, you do want to use the Ranger barrel, and that's going to give you the best recoil control as well as the best bullet velocity. Then for the underbarrel, you want to use the Commando foregrip, and this is going to give you the best aiming stability and recoil stabilization. Ammunition, 50 round mags is the only option you've got. And then lastly, you do want to choose that VLK optic because it does actually help with the recoil as well. But if you're on keyboard or mouse, or you're just very good at controlling the recoil on the RAM, now if you've been using the RAM for a while and you enjoy using it, continue to use this weapon. It's still a great long range rifle. But if you're new to the game and you're struggling to use this gun, then maybe switch to some of the other weapons on this list. Just not this one though. This is the Cold War AK-47. Now this gun has one of the fastest TTKs at long range at 700 milliseconds. And it is a great gun, and you can use it at long range if you're very skilled. Similar to the Ram 7, you need to learn the recoil pattern of this gun, but once you've got it down, then you could be beaming at long range with this. And maybe not like super long ranges, but more medium to long range, so maybe like about 100 to 150 meters. So for the muzzle, you do want to use the GRU suppressor. It's going to give you sound suppression, bullet velocity, recoil control, and damage range. Then for the barrel, you do want to use the Spetsnaz RPK barrel, and this is going to give you bullet velocity as well as that recoil control. Then the underbarrel, you do need to use the Spetsnaz grip to control the recoil as much as possible. Ammunition, you could go for the 45 round mags or the 60 round mags. Both are great options. I would just stick the 60 on here just because. And then lastly, you do want to choose the Axial 3 times or the Royal and Cross 4 times optic. So for anyone wondering about the Modern Warfare counterpart to this weapon, it actually has a 770 millisecond TTK at long range. It does output a little bit more damage, but even though it does output more damage, the Cold War AK has a faster rate of fire and therefore has the better TTK values by 70 milliseconds. So there's a huge difference there. So if you're an AK fan, make sure you're using the Cold War AK. It is the better option here. And last but not least, at number 1, we have the FARA again. Now this gun has been number 1 for a while now, to be completely honest, and it's still the best long range rifle in the game. If you think back to that 5 TTK list that I gave you earlier on in this video, the FFAR had a 600 millisecond TTK, and then this was the second best TTK at 684. So it actually has the best TTK, and also this gun has pretty much no recoil. Now, even though they did nerf the recoil with the most recent update, this gun pretty much had like no recoil before this update, and now it's got like a little bit of recoil. So there's still not much recoil to this gun whatsoever, and it's still very easy to manage. And I do believe everyone's just going to go and continue to use the FARA because it is, like I said, the best long range rifle in the game at the moment. So for the muzzle, you do want to use the GRU suppressor for the sound suppression, bullet velocity, recoil control, damage range. You do want to use the Spetsnaz grip to control the recoil as best as possible. You do want to choose the Spetsnaz RPK barrel, again to control the recoil and get the best bullet velocity. The optic, again, like I said, is personal preference, but I like the Axial 3 times. And then for ammunition, you want to choose the Spetsnaz 60 round mags. And this is the best long range rifle in the game at the moment. Like I said, it has the TTK to back it up. It has pretty much no recoil, even comparing it to some of the other weapons on this list. So there we have it. Those are the top 5 best long-range rifles inside Warzone at the moment. If you enjoyed this video and you learned something new, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we try to reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers. And also click that link in the description down below and subscribe to our second channel. We do post extra content over there, especially like gameplay content and short form content. And thank you very much for watching.